and let's dive right into our webinar today. I am Mark McWaters, and I am with Ambition, and very happy that you are here. I'm going to introduce Christina and Ryan here in just a second, but you are here today to hear about the psychology of sales performance and why designing compensation and coaching plans to energize every revenue role is important right now. There's a chance, a really good chance, that your organization at this very time, November, is planning the big initiatives for next year. And as they plan those big initiatives, they are thinking, how do we activate our sales team best around the initiatives that will help us win as we head into the new calendar and for some, the same new fiscal year? So, uh, our speakers, again, I'm Mark. I'm here in Nashville. Sorry for the bad Paris, Tennessee joke. I lead the sales team. I've been with the company for almost 8 years. Been in IC, led in the SMB mid-market space and the enterprise strategic space here at Ambition, and excited to talk about these topics with you here today. Joining me to my right or left, here's Ryan Milligan. Ryan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Ryan Milligan. I lead the sales and revenue operations teams here at QuotaPath, based in the Philly suburbs. QuotaPath helps you use your comp plan to drive the right performance from your sellers and automates the process of calculating and paying commissions. So, solving a couple problems in this space and really excited to chat more. I've actually been a RevOps leader for the bulk of my career and took over leading our sales team about a year ago. So, a fun shift for sure. Happy to talk more about it.
Yeah, we were just talking earlier about Christina pointed out the uniqueness of having sales and rev ops in the ownership, which makes a ton of sense these days for sure. So, Christina, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Christina. I'm the CEO and I'm one of the co-founders of Lester. We utilize AI practice platforms to derive a skill proficiency map, and then we use that proficiency map to predict mistakes that you're about to make on actual customer calls, and then proactively help you close those through practice before you do. And so, obviously, the ability to hit targets and maximize that compensation plan and do it the right way is of utmost importance. And my background is I'm a 17-year sales veteran, so started my career as a full cycle AE, worked up to CRO, and then bounced over to this seat to solve this problem. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, I think we've got a good breadth of experience between the three of us, and excited to dive into these topics. I'm going to quickly just frame up a little bit of why we're here, and then the goal of this is that we give you all, the audience, some really tactical pieces that you can take from the conversation. You're not going to hear us talk about, high pie in the sky stuff of, thought leadership. You're going to hear real examples of how we approach these problems and what we've done in our businesses and what our customers have done to help solve things around creating this performance culture with compensation and coaching. So, first, we here at Ambition, we think a lot about motivation and kind of how motivation differs and kind of evolves. So, on one side, you've got a motivation, which is essentially you're not very motivated. You might be disengaged for a number of reasons. And in the middle, you have this extrinsic motivation. So, what are the things that motivate you from a purpose, from a cause? Like, Mark, you believe in sales coaching. That is why you are a sales leader at Ambition. And then you have this intrinsic motivation, which is more focused on rewards and things that help drive more of the right performance. And so, the three of these are important things for you to think about as you drive the initiatives at your organization, both from, again, this coaching sales performance lens and through the importance of using levers like compensation to help motivate your team appropriately. So we've got this recognition being important of how we motivate our teams. We, of course, are going to talk a lot about rewards and already talking about the importance of kind of keeping teams accountable, keeping people focused on the right KPIs and the right coaching operating rhythm to transform an organization. What we believe is that the three of these are the secret sauce, if you will. The combination of these three things is how an organization really drives effective change heading into the new year. So the first part that we are going to talk about, and Ryan's going to take the lead here, is around compensation. I can speak as a sales leader that comp plans are not my favorite thing to think about. They're complex, they're emotional, they're whenever you roll them out, the team's not excited to hear them, right? So you're constantly thinking, how do I motivate my team the right way with compensation? But how do I do it in a way that fires up my team, not demotivates my team? So I love that Ryan's our expert here and certainly has seen a lot of the right way of doing things. I've probably committed some of the crimes of wrong ways of doing things. But Ryan, tell us a little bit about how you approach compensation plans that drive performance.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think one of the things that I think a lot about is your compensation plan is one of your best tools paired with coaching and training and enablement to drive your go-to-market team to deliver the revenue you want for your business. And so if you don't have a compensation plan that motivates the seller to know, okay, this is how much more money I'll make if I close this type of revenue, they're just going to throw things against a wall and see what sticks, which won't move the needle forward for the business. So the first thing, and I do a lot of free compensation plan consulting. I'm happy to do that for anyone on this call. I'm the opposite, Mark. I find it very fun. So I'll drop, people can chat with me
Yeah,
whenever
book some time with me.
that. Yeah, exactly. The first thing that I always recommend or I ask in these conversations is, what is the top metric your business needs to move next year in order for this to be a win? Is it you have to move from SMB to enterprise and dramatically grow your average contract value? Is it that you have a retention problem and you have to focus on gross revenue or net revenue retention? Is it you're launching a new product and this product has to go really well? What is that one thing that the business needs to move? And then how do I use the comp plan to pay sellers, marketers, BDRs, account managers more money for bringing more of the type of revenue that has a movement of some up funnel metric that impacts that metric? So gross revenue retention is always a great example of this. Hey, my marketing team needs to deliver more ideal customer ICP pipeline in order to bring on more prospects who could be a long-term fit, who are going to retain. Then I want to motivate my sellers to sign more 3 or 4 year contracts because they tend to renew at a higher rate because they've had more time to get up and running. And then I'm going to accelerate the commission rate for my account managers for, retaining or closing renewals early and converting those into longer term contracts as well. And so what you're trying to do is say, okay, hey, here's the big metric we have to move, like gross revenue retention. How am I telling a seller, a BDR, a marketer, an account manager through her variable comp where to focus her time and what types of deals or what type of pipeline to generate if it's important for their wallet and thus kind of important for the business as well. So to make the seller care, show them how much more money you'll pay them for this type of revenue, and you bet they will start only selling or leading into selling only that type of revenue.
It's so true that what was the book about, like, Who Moved My Cheese, I think is what it was called, and it was essentially like you have to put the incentive in the area that you want the behavior to drive. And
Yep.
we as sales leaders have to remember that even though it can be hard to change such an important thing like compensation, it can be done the right way. So one question I would have for you as someone in role who kind of lives through this is, what best practices do you have around length or like simplicity? I know that
Yep.
some camp, it's like keep it dead simple. You should be able to explain your comp plan in 1 minute to a
Yep.
seller. Or is it, you know what? That's actually a myth. Like you have to cross every T, dot every I, think through every scenario. It needs to be longer. You'll thank me later. Is it, is there one thought or the other that you tend to align to more?
Yeah, definitely more the former. You want to keep it as simple as possible. We talk about it like a pizza where you don't want more than two toppings. 3, 4 pizza topping pizzas are a little bit much because you don't want to spread how the seller is operating or how the marketer is operating too thinly. So the first, you want your seller to be able to say, these are the characteristics of great revenue. And that is ICP customers who sign 2 year or more contracts. That's what great revenue looks like for the business. I earn my highest commission rate if I sell a 2 year ICP deal versus a 1 year non-ICP deal, for example. And so the way you structure it is you have a base set of commission rates that are a function of attainment. So, 0 to 100% quota attainment, you earn one rate, maybe 101% plus, you accelerate the rate because, you've overachieved. And so the rep wants to be excited about that. So, maybe that's a 10% base rate and a 12% accelerated rate. And then you just add to the rate. If the deal happens to be a multi-year deal, I'll give you another 3 points. If the deal happens to be an ICP deal, I'll give you another 2 or 3 points. So the rep can model in her mind all of the different like combinations that are, at this point, 6 different rates I could earn for closing different type of revenue. So that when it's 4 o'clock on a Friday and they've got 10 deals in pipe, they can look and see, okay, this deal is a 2-year ICP deal. I'm going to make way more money on that than this 1-year non-ICP deal. I'm going to pick up the phone and call that deal. And I make a higher commission rate for closing that deal because that deal is better for the business. And so it's aligning how the seller is paid and how they're excited on payday to what's great for the business.
I appreciate the simplicity of that. And that is certainly something that I have lived. Christina, I'm curious to hear, you've been in sales a long time. Now you're in a bigger seat as CEO and co-founder. How do you think about compensation performance and, when you're driving the team at Luster or in, previous roles, what was fundamental to how you saw that work best?
I would say I agree, and I plus one on so many things around what Ryan said. And one of the reasons that, in my opinion, sales leaders and ops are such critical counterparts, you will always hear me say that it is never too early to hire operations, because really it is a 1-2 punch that brings together revenue, and you're really thinking about covering all gaps. And one of the things that I will touch on is how often accidentally the comp plan doesn't wind up working in favor of your customers. And so you wind up with reps or CSMs or AMs or BDRs who are misaligned with the end result and the problem that we solve for our customer. I'll give a great industry example of this. So I started my career in insurance and selling insurance. And that is one of the industries where you have two different types of people that can basically sell you financial services outside of insurance. You have a fiduciary and a non-fiduciary. A fiduciary has to exist because there are people who will sell you a policy that you don't need because they make more commission off of it, right? And so you actually have to have a type of person who is legally bound to listening to you and selling you the right product, regardless of whether or not they make the most
Wow.
commission. And the fact that that's a real thing, right? I would be asked all the time when I was an insurance salesperson. I'd sit at the table and like, look at Ryan laughing. He knows, right? It's like you're sitting there and it's like, are you a fiduciary? And what they're asking is, are you going to sell me a thing that I don't actually need because you're going to make the most money? And where do we see this show up then when we're looking at things like B2B and B2C technology sales? We look at pushing somebody to buy something before they actually need it and not on their timeline because my spiff says that I have to get you to close this now. And then what happens? We rush them into seat. They don't launch for 2 or 3 months. They have a terrible implementation. They lack adoption. Risk goes through the roof and they wind up churning, right? So there's all of these examples of when our compensation plan accidentally incentivizes the wrong behavior, we can make our customers collateral damage to that. And so it really is taking this well-rounded approach of, we have a product, a service, a new SKU, whatever it is that we want to push. And I've been on sales teams, I've led sales teams where I'm that person that's like, we have the new product and everyone's going to buy the new jobs product or the new brand product, right? And so we call all of our existing customers with commission breath and we're like, you got to try this new product. It's great. You got to buy now. The price is low. And we forget that this may not be what this customer needs. And if we sell the customer what they don't need, then we create the leaky bucket, and no company can survive if your churn goes through the roof. You cannot build a business on a leaky bucket. And so often that derives back to a compensation plan that benefited the rep, the company, not the customer.
And I think you do have to, I love that point because you have to remember that your individual rep is not thinking about the NRR and revenue retention of your business nearly as much as you are, right? They do not have as highly indexed of an equity portfolio in the business as you do. They are focused, rightfully so, on what their commission plan is telling them what to do. And so there is so much value in saying, hey, I'm going to reward you for bringing better revenue. You're going to see that immediately when you get your commission check so that the business will be beneficial. It's hard for especially sales leaders who sit on management teams and our executive leadership teams and operate with that first principle of, hey, our management team is focused on the net revenue retention of this business. But then when they turn to go down to their team doesn't care nearly as much as their management team does. So you're trying to use your comp plan almost to bridge that first principle, like first team approach to net revenue retention to an individual seller who cares a lot about, like make them care a lot about it.
Yeah, and I mean, they also just assume their comp plan is incentivizing them to do the best thing for the business. So if they continue to do that, and then they hear how business performance is struggling because, you know, churn is really high, and they don't understand that, they're like, well, I just sold the deals. I did what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I hit my number. I
yeah,
went to President's Club, right? The churn isn't in front of me. It's not on my desk, right? And so, yes, people care about the carrot.
these are such good points. Thank you all for these examples. And I know we already had a question, and I can't. Let me see if okay,
I answered it was
okay,
about
good.
marketing pipeline, which I love marketing teams on variable comp, honestly. I think like at QuotaPath, I mean, we're big commissions people, so everybody at QuotaPath's on variable comp, which is fun. So everybody is in some way variably compensated on the performance of the business. I love marketing teams on variable comp. I think it's amazing. Hey, you're generating high quality pipeline that's converting into revenue. How do I reward you for generating more of that? And if our business needs to move into the enterprise or we need to generate pipeline in this certain industry, I'd love to accelerate what you're earning on a per pipeline dollar for bringing more of that type of pipeline. So you kind of break down these walls between marketing and sales and customer success with a really good comp plan. And it's,
I
I hate to say
agree
it,
on
but
the
it is really valuable.
Yep. Marketing on variable makes all the sense in the world to me. I also will
I
say, as a sales who runs the world mentality that I have, I admit I'm biased. I'm like, everyone should be on a variable of some sort.
Mhm.
But
uh,
I
yeah.
especially do agree on leads. Go ahead, Christina.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, and I'm laughing. The one flag that I will throw that winds up happening when you do this is you start getting into fights at the executive table about attribution.
Mhm.
Because if everybody like this is, I was like, the panel's gonna laugh again, right? But this is a real thing where it comes down to you have this moment where I agree. I think everyone should be like, yeah, not just an exact like everywhere. We all fight with each other, right? Because there's this, we want everybody to be paid off of the leads that they are bringing in, but attribution becomes this really sticky thing. And I see most companies that look at a multi-attribution type of metric are the ones that actually see real, not to drop a buzzword, but synergy between sales and marketing. Because a real life example for anybody in the room that is thinking like, well, attribution, why is that confusing? You think about the fact that you are at an event and somebody walks up to the booth and they shake the hand of the person at the booth and the lead comes in, the deal closes, right? And they're like, well, great. The source of that deal closing was the event, and the event was put on by marketing. Marketing gets credit for that lead, but then sales goes, we've actually had that lead and that account in our CRM for the last 2 years. We sent them 3 emails. We invited them to 2 webinars. They answered. I actually did a demo. That person left. A new person came in. We invited them to the event. Then they came to the booth. Then they shook our hands. So it's actually sales that should get credit for that lead because we were the first ones to touch it, right? So you can wind up in this infighting of fighting over the attribution of who's actually impacting your top of funnel. So looking at multi-point attribution and the idea, the goal then isn't who is the one that brought in the lead. The goal is as many of us as possible that can touch a lead to make it warm before it comes into it. Each of us now get a piece of the pie, right? We all own inbound lead funnel and it's a team. So if marketing gives a high five and sales gives a high five and that deal closes, we both win.
Well, and it's interesting because the other option, which is what we shifted to here, is marketing gets variable comp credit for all pipeline, right? At the end of the day, like marketing is very involved in your brand's ability to generate pipeline in the first place. So I tend to point my sellers much more towards closed won revenue from a variable comp perspective and tend to point the marketing team much more towards pipeline of any kind. Like even if it's a rep cold called and booked a demo and then it eventually closed, the person probably had heard of QuotaPath through a webinar or a
That's
community event
awesome.
or something like that, which is amazing, right? So I think yeah, you definitely want to cut down that infighting as much as possible.
Definitely an awareness for sure to
Yeah.
all of it, the marketing influences. All right. Hey, audience, we told you we were going to get into the weeds and give you some tactical stuff. There's already a few in that. So keep the questions coming and we will continue to make this conversational. So The second part that we're going to talk about is the role of coaching and how this plays. And this is something very near and dear to Ambition's heart and Luster and QuotaPath. These are all, we all play in the arena of helping drive more effective conversations between a manager and an employee. And so I'm going to start a little bit on this one of our experience and what we've seen with customers. And um, the first thing I will point out is that at most organizations, coaching is happening on a regular basis. And managers, for the most part, want to be effective coaches. The challenge is that these managers are busier than ever. Their teams have likely grown over the last couple of years. They have been asked to hit similar or higher numbers, and they're putting out more fires than they have in the past. And so what happens then is coaching becomes very drive-by. And there's not a lot of formal preparedness that happens, not because the manager doesn't want to do it, but it's laborious usually for them to get to a place where they feel like they can have an effective developmental coaching conversation. So, the first thing that I want to point out is the importance of creating this structure for the manager. Create time where these coaching conversations can happen. And maybe the lowest hanging fruit of that is the one on one conversation between a manager and an employee. If you don't expect this from your team right now, you should. This is achievable. There should be at least 30 minutes once a week where a manager and an employee are sitting down and not just covering their pipeline for the account executives. And so for the C-suite folks on the call, is that an expectation currently? If not, I would challenge you that you should create that time. Now, why do you create that time? Because it creates a space where the manager can effectively develop the employee. Now, are they prepared to do that? Do they need additional training? Those are all conversations that happen. But just like how you have obsessed over sales process for the last 20 years, let's obsess over the coaching process. Let's obsess over the coaching operating rhythm for your organization. Why does that matter? If you can create this coaching operating rhythm, your huge compensation change initiative, to use a quota path example of next year, you no longer are going to worry about the communication of that initiative to the front line and if it's happening and was it documented and how do they feel about things. You now have a flywheel where whatever your new initiative is, you have a communication path to the frontline manager and to the employee to ensure your initiative is being coached on and coached on properly. So accountability is key. The second part to coaching effectiveness is you must be able to manage if it's working or not. There is a manager accountability to this as well. So if I'm on Christina's team and I am struggling, Christina's boss, my second level or third level, should be able to see, is the coaching program between the two of us for new pipeline generation, for example, actually working? And we live in this world where everything is measured, and you'd think, oh, it's pretty easy to know if coaching is working or not. At most organizations, they're not able to tie their coaching programs to a KPI. And that in this day and age is pretty fundamental to how we all know you drive change in an organization. So creating the structure first, or creating the space for that conversation to happen, creating accountability to make sure it does happen, and then also creating the metric driven approach to tell you if the coaching conversation is working or not. Now, Christina, I know that you all do a lot around enabling an employee to, for example, like handle objections better with a buyer or a different persona inside of the organization. How do you all at Luster, how do your customers think about creating this consistent coaching motion for their revenue?
Yeah. The biggest thing that is missing with most, I would say, training and coaching is the prescription for what you're coaching and why, and how that relates to how you're about to perform or do your job. And so if you kind of go back to behavioral cognitive psychology, as adults, we can only take in so much information at a time, and we can't spend all day at work simply learning. And even if we could, the forgetting curve tells us that the moment that I learn something brand new, if I don't make that learning kinesthetic, meaning I learned it and now I'm going to go and do it within 2 days, 87% of what you learned is not retained and it's gone. And then when you actually go and wind up having to perform on what you were coached on, maybe even earlier that week, you're doing some sort of strange amalgam of what you were doing and what you heard, and you're insecure. And we wind up making customers collateral damage to our lack of ability to really ingrain skills. And so the idea is, with the little bit of time that you have to coach, the prescription looks like, what are the skill gaps that you have right now? Can I see them in real time? And how are those gaps about to impact your revenue? Meaning, if I look at the calls that you have coming up on your calendar later today to 3 days from now, if there are gaps that you have that are about to impact your ability to get revenue or retain revenue in the next 3 days, I need to be coaching you on those gaps because you're about to have to perform them. And if you do that coaching in real time, coaching is never done. There's never an element of like, no, Christina was having a really hard time with objection handling, and I gave her a real solid coaching session. She's good now, right? Like that's not how it works. And so there is, what is the list of skills that are important for me to perform my job? Which of those do I have to perform in a revenue capacity or revenue supporting capacity in the next 3 to 6 days? And am I spending my training and coaching time prescriptively on me based on where I'm about to step in mud? And so for us, it's about finding and supplying that data of what does the proficiency look like? Where is it about to impact you? And now what do we do about it?
I really like where that took me is to being inside of a one-on-one with a sales rep who, let's say, has a call with Ryan in RevOps tomorrow. And that sales rep may be very familiar with how to sell a VP of sales because ambition tends to sell to a lot of them.
Yeah.
And Ryan is a VP of sales too. But for this example, let's say he's just in RevOps. That conversation
Just the
is going to
RevOps
look a
guy.
little different, right? And so, being able to coach them to the landmine of what is coming versus, hey, we're supposed to be in a pipeline program about outbounding. Let's talk about your, upfront contract and your cold call. Like that's the wrong time to have that if they're about to meet with the VP of RevOps tomorrow in a deal that's forecasted this month. And
Exactly.
so, that's a very tactical, easy thing. So for the frontline, not just frontline managers, but leaders, period, that are on this, as you approach your one-on-one, you're probably looking at the calendar of people on your team. Who are those meetings with? What are their personas? What is the gap that that rep has walking into that meeting that you can help better prepare them for? That's a great example.
Well, it's super interesting because I love the point about how do you measure it in a very short period of time. I had a one-on-one yesterday with a member of my team who was having challenge consistently setting next steps on for like a next call on first demos. And so I basically was like, hey, let's spend a lot of time in the last 10 minutes of your first demo. How do you present the value and make sure you're grabbing, a valuable next step, whether a POC or a pricing review call or something like that. I look at your calendar, you have 4 net new demos coming up. Let's meet on Thursday and see how many of those, net new demos did you get a next call booked with. Let's set a target of 3 of the 4, because some people will just take a first demo and say, not interested, what have you. And let's see, did we get to that number? Yes or no? And if we didn't, let's talk about what we learned or didn't learn. So I love the coach, immediately see what's going to happen and then drive versus you should do a better job setting next steps is just like a vague ongoing thing that's not super measurable and fruitful.
100%.
And so many frontline managers have been promoted from being the super rep and don't know, or they're coached, hey, just drive every next step in every deal. And sure, that can be valuable in places. But what Christina outlined and Ryan reiterated is the importance of being able to have more of like a almost just in time learning approach that allows for them to prepare for the most urgent thing that will help drive revenue to the business. And I don't think many people are going to dispute that being the right approach to coaching effectiveness. Okay. let's keep moving, and we're going to continue talking about how to really bring comp and coaching plans to driving initiatives. And I think Ryan did a good job in mentioning in that first topic around. Let's start with the North Star. Is it gross revenue retention? Um, Ryan, what would be another example of like, I'm going to give you a couple that are going through my head. I'm curious what you're seeing most right now. um, a lot of people introducing AI to products, and there's like an add-on or an upsell or a increase to the renewal. And companies are thinking, how do I activate compensation around this new initiative? And I don't know if AI is the best example there, but it's one I'm certainly hearing about a lot.
Sure.
For something like that, how would you approach the alignment of sales, customer success at driving that new product or that new focus in 2025?
Yeah, so walk your way through the entire adoption of that AI product. So what are the types of people or types of organizations that are going to benefit from using this product? How do I know those categorically and thus motivate marketing to generate more of that type of pipeline? Maybe it's enterprise customers only in these certain industries. So let me accelerate the rate of like earned for pipeline gen for enterprise in these industries. On the sales side of the house, I mean, you're going to combine coaching here. So how do I train you on how to actually sell this product? And to the point before that Christina made, identify the people who actually will benefit from this thing, not just pitch it to everybody, and then accelerate your rate for attaching like a new business deal that attaches this product, and then accelerate the commission rate for an account manager or pay them an extra percentage or a couple points on revenue for renewals that have this product attached. So you've basically identified who wants it, train the team on how to sell it, motivate them to sell it. Hey, I make more money if I attach this product. Train the account management team how to sell it and pay them more money if they attach it as well. And so you're basically going through identify ideal customer for this product, motivate the seller to sell this product, and then motivate the renewing team to find value in that for the customer as well.
Christina, so how about the enablement side of this alignment? And in this AI example, how would you approach using predictive enablement as something that you all talk about of being able to drive this alignment?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing is there's a lot of amazing enablement and training and curriculum and workshopping that unfortunately is delivered to individuals that are not in the mindset or not in a place where that is something they have to perform in the near future. And so it goes in one ear and out the other ear. The other thing is it's difficult at any organization to make sure that the enablement is aligned with the individual's needs. And so what we try to do is we try to say, hey, we're going to try to do training that fits the biggest use case, right? Like the most examples of this, which means you are always taking up enablement equity with individuals where that's not the core thing that they need to do their job. So you are always underserving somebody. And so then there's that idea again of enablement really partnering with sales leadership to determine, is this a training issue? Is this a coaching issue? How do we know? And when are we going to go ahead and enable people? So I will give you an example of using something like predictive enablement and even hiring and onboarding. So in my career, I have yet to hear of an organization, and this sounds planted, but it's not, outside of some of the Lustre users who are actually able to use this because of predictive enablement. You get the AEs, the CSMs, the BDRs who come out of their onboarding, and the AEs usually say, yeah, that was pretty good. It was really focused on my role. I got that. I have a couple questions. I'm not quite ready to go do my job yet, but I feel pretty close to being there, right? And then the CSMs are like, that felt like it was entirely geared toward the account executives. I don't really know how to do my job. Now I have to go and figure out how to do my job. And then you have the BDRs that are somewhere in between that, right? So it never feels like onboarding and ramp is actually addressing the needs of not just the people in that role, but their individual needs. And so then there's this idea of how do we hire people, gain an idea of their proficiencies and deficiencies before they even start in the job. And then we do customized onboarding to that individual by utilizing a combination of training, practice, and coaching so that they're actually exit ramp able to do the job because we know where your gaps are, we know where your strengths are, and now the program can meet you. AI is an amazing use case for that. because AI can fill those gaps to make it feel prescriptive, right? AI can say, hey, based on your proficiency map, these are the things you need to be trained on. Here's the collateral from your company that's going to help you to up level in that skill. Here's a couple of calls that your other colleagues were on where it's going to help you with that area where you're not quite sure yet. You seem to have questions on XYZ. Here, let me answer that for you, right? So AI able to take your company's collateral and push it to an individual based on their deficiencies is a great use for AI that doesn't take up human equity. So there's a lot of ways to plug things in, but the first place that you have to be is, do you have a way in real time to identify the proficiencies and deficiencies of every customer facing employee in real time? And if you don't, that's a really great place to start.
I love the term enablement equity. First, I need to get that out. I need to steal that,
Sure.
because that's a very real thing. Like, what are you asking for? How much time is it? What kind of lift?
Yeah.
And, to call it what it is, a lot of enablement orgs right now may have a budget, but they can't really spend it without finance or sales leadership saying, we agree that's the priority. Right. And so there's an inequity part of that, that they have to be very selective with what they ask. Um, and I definitely agree with that new hire use case, AI, for all the hype it is right now. It's being able to eliminate admin tasks, like pulling the right document at the right time, that you can take to the bank. AI is really good at that. It may not solve every problem, but reducing admin time right now
Sure.
is a really useful way to drive that home. So
Mhm.
yeah, both really good examples of kind of using compensation and then using enablement at a customized individual basis to create wins. One example that I'll use for ambition when we talk about driving initiatives. So Zoom is a great customer of ambition. Since we're on a Zoom call, this is an easy one. They for years were just selling this, right? Like what we are doing. And what many people didn't realize, and maybe some still don't, is that they sell a whole platform of products. And so their CRO's big initiative was, we got to be a platform play. We can't just be this, meeting room company. And so, how did he approach that? Rather than approach it with every frontline seller, he said, I'm going to go win the minds and hearts of the frontline manager, and I'm going to create a process that ensures this is the talking point between my leaders and my teams. And he had a med pick approach to it, and being able to drive that kind of consistency on the right topic or initiative in the coaching framework that you desire. This is another place where AI can take a lot of the admin work of prepping for the right coaching conversation and helping prop up a manager to be in the right place, to have the right conversation, to have it documented. And that's a big reason why they have attributed that as a big reason why they've been able to shift relatively quickly as a business. And driving initiatives at scale is so hard. There's multiple ways to do it. But I think the one common theme that we are driving through here is creating alignment around what matters, enabling the people closest to the problem with the solution to that challenge. And what I don't want people to take away is that AI is going to solve that completely for them, but it can help put you on third base, if you will, in the baseball analogy, where you just got to run home. Well, we can get you to third base, and there are ways that help your managers, your sellers kind of get to that proverbial third base. So I give that as a Zoom example, and I know you all mentioned a couple, but Ryan, any quota path example here that you'd like to call out kind of around this alignment and what you've seen work best?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would actually point to our own business at QuotaPath. As we've evolved our go-to-market motion, one of the things is we've moved more and more of our customers into longer-term contracts to drive more value, to give them more time to be implemented and get up and running. And our compensation plan has been a huge tool to drive that. So, a couple of years ago, we were selling a lot of customers on month-to-month contracts. Growth stage startup, getting up and running, right, as you're getting established, and then accelerating commission rates for sellers to drive 1 year commitments. And then as we went through that arrangement, all of a sudden we get the bulk of our customers in 1 year contracts, and then make the same thing for for 2 year. And so it's basically what we've done within our own compensation plan internally is accelerate the rate that a seller earns for a longer term contract. You accelerate it enough to make it so exciting for them from a take home pay perspective. They lead with, hey, that's the only type of contract that we offer now, which has basically been the shift in our business. We offer 2 year contracts today. And so using your comp plan as the tip of the spear to motivate the seller to say, okay, can I close this type of revenue? Yes, then you establish that as best practice and move on to the next way to motivate them. And so that's been one here internally that's been really fruitful for us, is using the comp plan to drive that change in behavior to deliver the revenue that we need to improve both gross and net revenue retention.
Makes sense to me, and also seems like a very logical way to approach that kind of transition. Having been in a young company, still we have a very much a startup vibe to it, and that is that hits home. Christina, how about for you? Any use case example that you'd like to share here?
Yeah, I mean, one that, I was talking a lot about kind of onboarding and ramp, and I actually think that this is where a lot of compensation plans wind up falling really short and motivating the wrong behavior. Is there's this idea of, if you were to go in the same company, and I've actually done this experience, or like I've done this experiment where I've been lucky enough to be able to advise over 50 B2B startups, and I always go in and I ask the whole team, and I was like, how long is your ramp? And everyone kind of looks around at each other, and then, and they're like, well, 3 months. I'm like, well, it's more like 6 months. Someone's like, well, it's actually more like a year. And I'm like, okay, interesting. And I write it down. And then I was like, all right. And then how do you know when a rep is fully ramped? Like when I say ramp, what does that mean to you? And there's usually a whole also bunch of different answers, right? Now you think about the reps and the revenue facing employees that are being hired in, where they're joining a company that does not have a defined denominator for what ramp looks like. And yet they have a compensation plan that usually looks something like month one, you get full commission, and you have zero quota. And then month two, it's like a little bit of a ramp quota. And then month three, it's a little bit more. And then by month four, you're good to go. But then half the leaders in the room just said it takes you a year to ramp, right? And so what I'm doing now is, now I am panicking because I want to hit my number. I don't want to be fired. I need to pay my bills. And so I am now going to find the path of least resistance to getting as much revenue as I can, which may not be the way that you actually have to go about getting the right revenue from the right customers. You're going to start hunting for low-hanging fruit. You're going to look for bad customers. You're going to hunt in the graveyard for customers that deliberately attrited because the product wasn't to fit, right? You're going to start making mistakes that you shouldn't make. And now you're going to spend the rest of your career at that organization correcting those mistakes. And so one thing that I will say is your compensation, identifying what your ramp should actually look like and how you properly motivate new employees to come into your organization, is so paramount and critical. And if you don't have that answer down, and if you are making, again, your reps collateral damage to your lack of ability to align on what ramp and comp should look like, your customers are going to pay the price.
I agree. Well, okay, team. So we're going to wrap up here with one key takeaway for the audience. For the audience, before we do that, if you have any other questions, we would love to answer those too. We've still got a little bit of time. And we will start, though, with our one takeaway for you all. Christina, Ryan, if there's one thing you hope the audience takes from the conversation this afternoon, let's share that here, and I will go first to give you guys a second to think about what that would be for you. So, my one thing is stop blaming the frontline manager for your performance challenges if you have not created the space and the process for them to be successful. If you have promoted the high performer into a manager role and thought they'll take over that team and, raise the performance, uh, you've probably also found out that that doesn't quite work like you thought it would. The super closer can't, super close the entire team. So create the space, create the process for your frontline manager, and you will see a difference in your results. So I'm just going to move right over. Christina, you're next to me. You go next. What's your one thing?
That the comp plan and the coaching, the training, the practice should be a unified front and getting the result that best serves your customer. And that has to be the guiding light. That has to be the end in mind. I can drop a whole bunch of different methodology touch points, like I'm going to hit Covey and Sandler and all of them. At the end of the day, right? Begin with the end in mind. And those two things should actually be completely aligned all the time, to the point where your organization should do gut checks, right? Is our coaching, training, and practice and our compensation plan aligning the right behavior that's going to serve our customers and keep them with us long term?
All right, Ryan.
Yeah, mine is it's going to be pretty adjacent. It's you know what great revenue looks like for your business. So make sure that your teams are earning the most money for great revenue. Use your comp plan to motivate them to deliver the right type of revenue for the business has been a big theme of mine recently, and one that I'll end with.
Yeah, for the C-suite folks, I imagine that's a conversation right now is what does right look like for the business next year, and aligning around what that North Star metric looks like and making sure your compensation and performance management aligns to those things. Uh, are two of the, step one and two to making sure your team wins next year. So, Christina, Ryan, thank you all for joining. I don't see any more questions that have come through the chat, so we will wrap it up now. Audience, thank you all for the questions throughout. We hope this has been really helpful. Again, our goal is that you take one thing that you can implement to your team. And please reach out to QuotaPath, Luster, Ambition. Find us on LinkedIn individually if you'd like to connect. But thank you again for the time. And this recording will also be shared. So for those who couldn't make it, that will be sent out as well. So we'll talk to you soon. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.